what got you here won't necessarily get you there or where you want to be. So I'd like you to think about, I'm sure you've all invested in software down the line and it was the right thing to do. And it's allowed you to process, record transactions, etc. However, business evolves because you've been successful. So key signs you've outgrown your ERP system. So just a few headline thoughts here. Performance and reliability issues, visibility of data, functionality limitations, and integration. So let's start with performance and reliability issues. I'm sure many of you experienced either yourself or your workforce complaining about the speed of the application. Is it locking up on your system? Is it taking too long to run a report, etc.? And it may well be that your system as it was designed was perfect. However, you grow, you're more successful, and therefore the current application can no longer deal with that.
Yeah, and I think visibility of data as well is really important. So, there's lots of people in the room that need information to be able to make decisions. Without ease of access to that data, and more importantly, accurate data, you're not going to be able to make those decisions, or those decisions might be wrong. So it's very easy to get into a position where you've got a lot of disjointedness within systems and processes, which you can end up in a position where you can't see or have accurate access to that data.
Functionality limitations. So again, go back when your business started and you may have been trading in one country and dealing with things like pound sterling was absolutely fine. You now deal with yen, pesos, euros, dollars, whatever it may be, and your system, you had to do workarounds to deal with that. It may be that you had stock stored in one location. Well, now you've kind of expanded and you've got multiple locations. It may be that you need more financial analysis by cost centers, departments, etc. And all of those features are things that you have to do outside of your current system.
And I think just following on from that, you can end up implementing little systems because it solves a problem at the time. And you end up with lots of little bits of systems all over the place, not really joined up. There's no sort of automation, no integration between them all. And it just can end up in a bit of a mess in terms of the joined up approach to.
And this is what we end up with, that paper's office that we were promised, our 21-year-old guy in the bottom left-hand corner there, looking a little bit frustrated. Essentially, we'd end up with a frustrated workforce. People don't know what each other are doing. You can't necessarily achieve what the business needs to achieve. Your systems are stopping you. So.
And I think the two key questions really that we're asking people to ask is, well, first of all, how long could you operate like it for? Not necessarily, some of these problems exist and may exist within your businesses. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to do something about it. It's more being aware of it, and it might be manageable now. So how long can it be manageable for? And more importantly, when should you start planning to solve those problems, or how do you solve them, and when do you start planning for it?
Yeah, I think the key takeaway from today is essentially planning costs nothing. Yes, on a little bit of time, but actual money, it doesn't cost. Okay, so the thought was if anything that was said already, I start thinking, yes, I'm here. I can't grow to my business to where I want it to be because of either integration limitations, functionality limitations, system issues. Then start planning for change. So first of all, we've talked about kind of S&E, S&D, whatever you want to call it. So we'll just put a couple, 3 examples of software. You might have heard of Sage 50, Xero, QuickBooks, other brands are available. But this is often what we see. Business is startup, and this is very much startup applications. And I'll use Sage 50 as an example. And you're doing your accounts, and you might be doing your invoicing, and you might be doing some orders in there. And then business progresses and other applications or other requirements come into play.
Yeah, so you might, you've now got an online presence, you can take a few orders on the web. Great. You might also now have some stock holdings, so you need to start storing some stock yourself. And then from that, you might think, I'm going to get a couple of salespeople, drum up something in business, so you need a little CRM system to track their activity. From that, the salespeople do really well, as some of them do. You then might, have some more complex requirements from customers and stock holding. So you've got, barcode systems, etc., warehouse management. And then following on from that, you need somewhere to store all of that data. So someone in the business knows Microsoft Access. So you end up with a new Microsoft Access database sitting there storing all of this data that you're now using to report on.
This is quite a common area you see. 300 years ago, someone knew Microsoft Access, decided to do a database, and that person is no longer with the business, let's say.
Or retired.
I was going to go reverse. And it works great. Hurrah! Everyone's fingers crossed, because when it doesn't, no one has a clue what to do. So there's a bit of a risk to the business. And actually, there's also a copy database as well, which does something. It's savvy, there's different people using it.
Yeah, and also the people that either don't trust or use the Access database, or use the Access database and then populate an Excel spreadsheet or two or three. Can I have a quick show of hands?
Who's experienced multiple spreadsheets in the business? They're sort of all doing the same thing, but different versions of them. You actually don't know whether version 17, version 2025, or whatever it may be, is the most accurate one. Only 2 people. No, actually a few more. Thank you for your honesty. What this then creates is a very disjointed and frustrated scenario.
And obviously we're aware this is an exaggeration, but I think everyone gets the concept behind it. It's not a nice place to be in, especially when you're hearing along with this, the frustrations from staff, the frustrations sometimes from customers, from suppliers. There's bottlenecks creeping in. It's not a nice place to be.
We could also talk recruitment of new people coming in, about how to learn systems, because if you're 20 years old, are you going to know Microsoft Access? So where do we go next on?
So where do you go next? So same 3 examples on the left. Over on the right, we've just picked 4 of what we'd probably term the bigger ERP solutions for SMEs. Sage 200 Professional, Business Central, SAP, NetSuite, and so on. So logically, someone might sit there and think, right, well, I'm using Sage 50 or 0. I need something new. I need the next step. What is that? And all of these names are bandied about. Others are available. You kind of look at that and you take a look, and then you realise very quickly that there is quite a large gap between the two. What software vendors have inadvertently done, in our opinion, is they've created this huge void between that left-hand side and the right-hand side in terms of complexity, in terms of the learning curve and the cost. So sometimes a business will be sitting in the scenario that we've discussed, looking over there and thinking, not a chance, not going to happen. So I think software vendors are realising what they've done. So in the example of Sage, obviously EDS is a Sage expert, so we're using that as the example. So what you've got, Sage 50 over on the left, Sage 200 Professional over on the right. Again, that gap can be quite large. So what Sage have done is they've created another product which sits firmly between the two, which is Sage 200 Standard. And what that allows businesses in the scenario we talked about to do is to think, well, I've now got a path. So yes, the end goal might be, I want something like Sage 200 Professional or the other brands that are available. But it's too big a jump now. I can't do it for whatever reason it might be. However, there might be some Sage 50, I think everyone in the room who knows Sage 50 would agree, there is a limitation to transaction volume. So that might be the driving force to, I need to do something.
Yeah, I think just to probably come in there, Simon, I think historically we've had a number of scenarios where people have perhaps been operating on Sage 50, and I know Sage are in the room, but they weren't ones. The gap to that Sage 200 Professional was so big from a number of factors you identified. If it is things like volume of data, if it is things like currencies, if it's things like potential integrations, then suddenly we have, let's call it a middle ground, which is Sage 200 Standard.
Yeah, and what it's allowing people to do now is have an alternative option that doesn't limit them later when they do want to make that jump to the bigger products. And I think that's the key bit. It's, it's giving you what you need, solving the potential short to medium term problems without the massive overhead of the investment that's required to get to some of these bigger products. We've launched two ways to implement, because the other thing with that is, yes, you can talk monthly subscriptions, you can talk costs of software, but a large proportion of the time, the big the bigger pill to swallow is the upfront implementation costs of software. Sometimes these costs are huge. So EBS has created two ways to implement. EBS self-launch and EBS smart launch. So EBS self-launch is effectively, EBS would onboard you with Sage 200 Standard in this example, give you and your admin users access to the software. We've then created a catalogue of implementation videos and tutorials, effectively allowing you to implement the software yourself. You then also have the, if you feel you need it, you have optional, can have optional assistance from EBS. But that's as and when you feel you need it. And then there'll also be a validation of go live. So if you think you're in a position where everyone in the business has been, trained, they've been through the learning catalogue, you feel confident you're ready to go live with it, we'll do a validation and a sense check of that, obviously raise any concerns and discussions we ensue. And also you then get the option of EBS's support, ongoing support.
If anyone lives a Birmingham accent, I will apologise for the learning videos created by Simon Pritchard.
The other option, if you're not into Birmingham accents, is EBS Smart Launch, which again is an EBS-led implementation. So, it is still us doing it in collaboration with you. However, because Sage 200 Standard in this example is a simpler, probably the wrong word to use, but I'll use it anyway. It's a simpler product to Sage 200 Professional. It's more standardized in terms of the way it works. So it's easier to implement some of those things, and it's easier to, get data in. It's easier to go through the processes because there is a fixed number of processes available. You will also have access to the self-learning material that you do in self-launch. And it will be an EBS-led go live, so on an on-site presence, and it will include the sort of ongoing EBS support as well.
Excellent. So, to summarise, we started off with our Sage 50s, Xero, QuickBooks, whatever it may be, and you may have experienced some or all of those applications. I can think of some in the room that were very much on that Sage 50 journey. They didn't have a couple of orders that they were putting in daily, that maybe nearly all. And essentially, they've now got into a stage where they've identified those issues. They've then moved forward with that next level over time, planning, etc. And therefore, we've ended up with a fully integrated solution. We have our honey set, which we will probably talk about later at some point. And everyone is a bit happier. So to finish off.
Yeah, so I suppose in summary, just because you have pains and frustrations, doesn't mean automatically you have to do something. You have to spend money, you have to look at software. All we're trying to say is if you think about those frustrations and what they actually mean in the real world, it's probably worth having to think about that and putting the plan in place for the next, whether it be 12 months, 2 years, 5 years, because what we don't want to do is wait till the wheels fall off before you start to plan.
Head out the sand.
Yeah.
And at that point, it's good night for me.
And it's good note from him.